I first played through the Mass Effect series, I was like every other generic Gary out there, and romanced Liara, and Tali was someone who didn't really get brought along on too many missions. As I returned to the series in a proper fashion with the release of the Legendary Edition, I was like a kid learning that you can put ketchup and mustard on a hot dog. I took Tali and Garrus along for every mission and found an appreciation for the character that I hadn't had before. And now, 3 years after my last playthrough of the game, I'm back to see if she really was as good as I remember. Welcome back everyone to another Mass Effect analysis video. As voted on by the Democratic Convention of YouTube, Tali received the most votes, and as such, today we'll be covering her entire story and romance across the trilogy, with a writing focus. Seeing how BioWare chose to structure her story, how they chose to grow her or regress her as a character, and generally the tools that they used to weave in a great story. Without further ado, I implore you to get yourself 4 Doritos Locos Tacos and a Crunchwrap Supreme, and don't forget the orange Fanta, because this one will be a long one. Following our Turian friend getting shot by this guy named Saren, who we suspect has gone rogue, we're tasked with finding any information we can to put him to justice. We first hear that Aquarian has some information about Saren and a link to him and the Geth. True to its genre of a sci-fi game, I had no idea what Aquarian was, but seeing Tali, her design just screams sci-fi with this spacesuit that she looks to be wearing. As it turns out, Tali does have some crucial information on Saren that could mean consequences. Firstly, it's not just a great plot point to have Tali have this information, but also the way in which she obtains it, her tech savviness. Having this companion start out being an important portion of the main story is always a good sign for the remainder of the character's writing. Her knowledge of the Geth is also a great addition, as the Geth in Mass Effect 1 are the main cannon fodder and force under Saren. Tali feels already like an extremely important and very useful ally to our squad because of this. The conversation that follows introduces us to the Reapers, of which Tali is a useful expositor of the plot again. This scene is very well crafted and is our catalyst propelling us into the game's second act. Tali helping piece together the knowledge of Reapers from Geth culture heralding the Reapers as gods also fits very well. Of course she'd know this, and it makes sense for her to be so involved here in informing the party of all of this. Something we'll have to be careful of, however, is overusing Tali as an expositor of too much plot. We don't want to just learn about the plot, but we want to learn about her. So hopefully we get some of that soon. Tali is then offered a spot on our squad by Udina, and Shepard can ask her if she's able to abandon her pilgrimage, which is this cool rite of passage done by all Quarians involving them leaving this giant ship flotilla that they call home in order to bring something of use back to the flotilla. And Tali says something very great here. She says that the whole point of the pilgrimage is to give themselves to the greater good. So if she turns her back on Saren and the Geth, what does that say about her? Oh, that's fantastic. That wraps up her intro, and as far as this goes, BioWare has done some great work already. Early on, we see Tali as someone that's perhaps a little bit naive and foolish enough to land herself in a spot where she thought she was meeting the Shadow Broker. She shows cunning in action, however, when she tosses an explosive in an attempt to free herself. She shows her vast knowledge of Geth culture, proving very useful to the main conflict of this game. And lastly, and I'd argue the most important thing, we find out what kind of person Tali is in her heart with that lovely line of what does that say about her if she abandons this entire plot. She sees this cause as noble and bigger than her people's tradition. She is able to see that helping save the galaxy from a possible Geth incursion would be the biggest thing she can give her people and the galaxy, but of course, it's also the right thing to do. Well done, BioWare. I oftentimes quote that the best way to have your audience learn about your characters is having those characters make decisions. By Tali choosing this over her pilgrimage, it's very clear that we know Tali is of a noble persuasion. When Tali is aboard the Normandy, we get to have a very in-depth conversation with her regarding mainly Quarian culture. Something I'll note with Tali in this game is that as far as squad mates go, she is cool. From a design perspective, of course, but her people's history and conflict with the Geth is both a massively overarching issue across the trilogy, but also one that isn't so black and white. not so evil versus good or right versus wrong. And that always makes things more interesting when a moral dilemma is placed within a conflict. Tali comes off extremely nerdy and smart, sharing her enthusiasm for the Normandy, and explains that compared to her own people's flotilla, which is made of bits and pieces from second-hand equipment, the Normandy is the fanciest one she's ever been on. She'll then talk about Quarian government and culture, explaining that it's part communist, part space pirateering minus the pirateering, part democratic, what with each ship having a say on matters within their own ship, that is then led by a civilian elected council, and then higher an admiralty board that is comprised of 5 members that have this unique ability to overrule a decision by the civilian board, but only once, because once they all agree to veto, they all must resign from their posts. This is some really cool lore. She'll then explain the pilgrimage in more detail, highlighting that the rite of passage is for the betterment of the flotilla, and that a Quarian never returns until they have something of value to bring back to whichever ship they wish to join, at which time the captain of said ship usually accepts their gift and they become a part of the ship. Again, this is some very cool lore. But this last portion of Tali's dialogue is truly the best in this scene. She offers a little more insight into what the Geth are, explaining that they get smarter the more of them there are, before giving you a lore dump that the Quarians created the Geth, and then slowly pushed the borders of AI until one day, a Geth asked what its purpose was, and by that point, even though they tried, it was too late to stop the now sentient race. Huh. Sounds a lot like a time period that we're currently in. Anyway, we get a classic Mass Effect 1 moral debate here, one of my favorite things about this game, when we can side with the Geth by calling Tali out, telling her that the Quarians created the Geth but wouldn't give them freedom and instead decided to try and commit genocide, which Shepard feels is wrong. Tali feels the opposite, claiming that no, the Geth aren't a sentient species and that they want to destroy all organics, hence why they've paired up with Saren, who, despite being an organic, wants to bring back the Reapers, who the Geth revere as gods. She calls them the enemy, but Shepard can point out that for 300 years, the Geth have never left the Veil, which they call home. If they really wanted to destroy all organics, you'd think they would have attacked at least once or twice. I love the fact that Tali is this important to Mass Effect 1's story, and she easily feels like a character that, despite the amount of dialogue in this section, a lot of it feels relevant. The problem is that we don't know too much about Tali herself, and this opening move was a really big chunk of lore dumping. I am okay with this considering this is the first interaction on the ship. This sets up the biggest things in Tali's life for us and gives us the base to build from where hopefully we can get some more personalization from Tali. Our second conversation with Tali has her downtrodden, revealing that she is finding the silence on the ship hard for her, unable to sleep, as in her culture, silence usually means something is wrong. She also reveals that the ship's crew size is full, yet the ship itself feels so empty. This is because back home, she usually worked on smaller ships with double the crew size. Finally, she admits that she is starting to see the point of the pilgrimage, that perhaps it's to show Quarians a different life, to perhaps show them what they'd leave behind if they never came back, which Tali reveals does happen to a few Quarians. Okay, this is great. Great stuff. This time, we still get some insight into Quarian culture, but Tali also relates how she is feeling, and I think we now get involved into one of her personal struggles. We know she's been on this pilgrimage for roughly a month now, and she's already explained to us what it is, but what Tali gives us here is how leaving her entire home and culture is impacting her. This is done in a very clever way by having her express an uncomfortableness in silence, which is obviously a bit odd since you typically want silence before you sleep. We get this cool anecdote from her, explaining that silence to her means something is wrong because, as we know, their ships are made of secondhand parts. So there is this really good layering to the dialogue that we've received so far. To finish this exchange off, perhaps having Tali so literally state how she's learning about the purpose behind the pilgrimage is a bit on the nose, but also it's not a huge crime. It's nice that we're seeing a bit of growth from Tali already, and getting a very relatable feeling of homesickness from her considering we, the player, are also new to all of this. Well done so far, BioWare. Our third conversation with Tali shows that she has cheered up, but is getting antsy. she needs to find something to bring back for her pilgrimage. There is a lot expected of her. Why, you might ask? Oh, well, her dad is on the Admiralty Board, and so he's a very powerful guy. Looking ahead into the future, I will note how tight Tali's story is. Her father, a plot point later in Mass Effect 2, is set up here as an extremely noble Quarian, a leader of people, responsible for the whole fleet. Excellent subversion of our expectations later on. But also, something I very much like that BioWare did with this game is how teenager-ish they make Tali in Mass Effect 1. She is on her rite of passage, and yes, she is probably a teenager in Quarian years, but look at two things for a moment. First, the problems that she has are feelings of homesickness and living up to your parents' expectations. Those are typically young adult problems to be sure, but look at the clash that this second point comes in with. Tali is also very noble, heeding the call she hears to help the galaxy, and that shows maturity beyond her years. It doesn't mean it's easy for her, but she knows what she has to do, and I like this. That's a typical character arc in coming-of-age stories, but it's clear that with Tali, things will be a little bit different since she already has that nobility to her. How simple her structure is in regards to her story, but the blending of the conflicts that she feels, contradicted by her maturity, makes for some very interesting characterization and some drama. Our fourth conversation with Tali has her asking us if she can have some Geth data that we retrieved from a little side quest. This conversation is actually missable if you don't do the Geth incursion mission. If you do, she'll say that the data could be extremely useful for her people. If you hand it over, she'll be very thankful but stay loyal by saying that until this mission is done, she won't leave your side. One thing I will say about this is that unlike Rex or Garrus, who hand you these quests, Tali doesn't hand you anything. You actually hear about this mission from Hackett, and it's considered an Alliance mission. Her quest sort of resolves pretty straightforward. I think what could have added to this scene is maybe making Shepard go against Hackett's orders, where Hackett might feel that this data is top secret, and he mustn't share this with anyone. And Shepard can make the case for Tali and her race. Instead, like pretty much all of the personal quests in Mass Effect 1, that's it. With that, Tali's story is pretty much finished in Mass Effect 1. Overall, she really did fit the sci-fi blend of this game, and her cultural background was very cool. She comes off very genuine, and that little coming-of-age arc she has in this game is subtle but well done. I think her also being so central to the Geth, especially in this game where we fight them all the time, makes her a must-have for a lot of missions. However, admittedly, she is pretty bare bones, as we didn't really get a chance to learn too much about Tali in this one. So far, her writing's okay. Let's move on to Mass Effect 2. In Mass Effect 2, I've already addressed how the game really explores some darker tones in the game. For Tali, this is also the case, as her story in this game really ramps up on a more personal level thanks to the loyalty missions. As we meet up with the elusive man, a man that is elusive, we can't help but wonder where all of our squad mates are. Well, Tali is the first squad mate we meet from the OG game, and that is a very cool honor to have. And she's got an updated design. Nice. When we enter into this abandoned colony, we see Quarians, and our minds immediately think of Tali. These guys are initially standoffish, but then Tali emerges, stopping her party from starting a firefight, and she is surprised to see Shepard alive and working for Cerberus. She appears to be leading these troops and giving them orders, so she's clearly matured. Tali wonders if we really are Commander Shepard, and if you did her mission in Mass Effect 1, you can cite the data that you gave her, and she'll stand down. The two parties then discuss why they're here, and Tali reveals they're looking for a Quarian named Vitor, who is on pilgrimage. It's a nice little callback to Mass Effect 1 and Tali's own pilgrimage here, drawing that line further that this version of Tali has passed her pilgrimage and is now running missions, commanding troops, and putting herself into dangerous situations once again. It's pretty cool. Everyone agrees they'll work together on this goal, and you split up. It's pretty much straight to business here, and while personally I would have preferred a bit of an extended discussion on the callback to the data, or Tali expunging a bit on her stepping up in her leadership role, we can move on. Following this, we find Vitor, who is delirious and hurt. We also find the Omnitool data, and some contention follows with Miranda and Jacob wanting to send Vitor to Cerberus for some questioning. while Tali wants to take Vitor back home, but is more than willing to give you his Omnitool data with all of his findings on it. A fair exchange. I would imagine that most players on a first run probably side with Tali here, and that might be by design. We don't know either of these two Cerberus knuckleheads, but we do know Tali. We can even ask Tali to join us right here, and true to her character, she'll state that she is on a mission so important that not even for Shepard can she abandon it. Thankfully, we can also ask her about said mission, but she won't say much due to the knuckleheads being behind Shepard, but she does reveal it's in Geth space. I do kind of wonder, if you're on that mission, why are you here, helping some random guy named Vitor? Odd. With this, Tali takes Vitor back to the flotilla before embarking on her mission. And that is it for Tali for the time being in this game, which is an utter shame. It is widely known from YouTubers like Big Dan Gaming that BioWare had a ton of voice lines for Tali and all the companions in this second batch of dossiers, as originally, BioWare was going to let you recruit whoever you wanted in any order. Unfortunately for Tali, she is relegated to the second batch of dossiers, and so you'll have to power through roughly 9 to 12 hours of story before you get a chance to recruit her. In truth, you only get some additional lines from Tali, of course. It's not like BioWare cut chunks of her story, but we don't get as much time with Tali, as opposed to someone like Garrus, who is recruitable from the jump in all 3 games. With Tali, we get a dossier on our desk regarding her possible recruitment, as we find out she's on a planet called Haestrom within Geth space. A nice pickup from the last time we saw her, as she no doubt is on the same secret mission she mentioned before, and now we've got to go recruit her. Again, I have to ask why now is the time that the man who is elusive thinks we should be recruiting her. I mean, Tali told us that after her mission, maybe she'd join, but what are we banking on with her this time? We already asked her once, and as far as I know, her mission hasn't changed. Is this a plot hole? No, but logically it doesn't make a lot of sense. As a player, I would ask why we couldn't have just gone to help Tali initially with her mission, since we're here anyway, but this is probably because of the cut content, so I'll move on. So we're off to Haestrom, and we find it swarming with Geth, giving us those Mass Effect 1 vibes, except this time the Geth are actually kind of hard. Not good vibes. We see a Quarian team get absolutely obliterated trying to protect a building, and we are then tasked with getting into said building. Around the area, we hear these audio journals from Tali, who wishes Shepard could be here to see the ancient Quarian ruins. Well, Shepard is here, and when we encounter Tali's hologram inside, she's admittedly pretty surprised to see us. We don't have a lot of time to catch up with Tali, who is staying calm given the circumstances, as we work together to develop a plan to bust her and the rest of the Marines she's with out of here. We have a pretty cool fight with the Geth before reaching Tali, who has just finished downloading this data as she states this whole mission has been a mess, but that she couldn't allow anyone else to go on something so risky. Again, that's pretty noble. We can ask Tali what she's after, and she'll explain the data is for exploring the nearby sun and how rapidly it's destabilizing. That shouldn't be happening, and the Admiralty Board wanted to know why. Very sci-fi in its reason, and when we asked Tali if it was worth it, even pushing her to provide her own opinion, she'll suggest that the price they paid here was too damn high, considering her and maybe Cal Rieger survived, while everyone else died. With this, Tali officially joins up with us. The debrief that follows is great again, as Tali calls Shepard out for his joining up with Cerberus, an organization that not only was behind some diabolical things in Mass Effect 1 involving the Rachni, but also, recently mind you, had blown up a portion of the migrant fleet in an attempt in their chase for a human biotic. "I am here for you, Shepard, nothing more," is a strong line in the sand from her. She doesn't like Cerberus, but you're her friend. She's helping you because you helped her, and I'm sure saving the galaxy is on her mind as well, given her stance regarding this in the first game. I also have to tip the hat to BioWare for just making Jacob the ultimate wrestling heel by asking Tali to introduce herself to Edie, the AI on the Normandy. The look she gives Jacob, even though we can't see her face, we know what it looks like. I love it. In our first actual chat with Tali, she acknowledges that the two haven't really had the chance to catch up, given all that they've been through. Tali reminisces on how she misses the old crew and faces, stating that it's odd and perhaps a bit scary that Cerberus is here this time around. She warns Shepard to be careful, sharing that Cerberus has put hidden cameras and listening devices everywhere, and going further, sharing more details on why the Quarian people hate Cerberus. A while back, they chased down this human biotic and recklessly blew up a ship in the process. Add to this that they have an anti-alien history and the encounters that you had with them in Mass Effect 1, and Tali is pressing the commander on their alliance. And that makes sense. This first chat ends pretty quickly, however, which is a bit odd. We've already been through a lot in-game and seen Tali twice, so I'd have expected the two to catch up a bit more on the happenings of Shepard's mission, perhaps having Shepard explain how the elusive man set them up on the abandoned collector's ship, or how they managed to develop a countermeasure. Perhaps Tali could have just mentioned a bit more on how advanced this ship truly is, or how disgusting it is having to work with an AI. I feel like this first talk back fell a bit flat, so hopefully, again like in Mass Effect 1, we get more from Tali. In our second interaction, Tali is troubled. She reveals that she has been charged with treason by her people. All the lore dumping she did in Mass Effect 1 rounds nicely here, as we refer back to the flotilla, government, and the Admiralty Board, as Tali says it's extremely uncommon for a Quarian to be accused of treason, stating it's reserved for crimes that affect the entire flotilla. The thing is, Tali has no idea what she's done. She's worried she'll be exiled, and Shepard can agree to help her, setting up her loyalty mission. Okay, this is a fantastic scene, man. Tali's writing in this series so far has been a bit of a surprise for me. I'll let everyone into my own experience within this game. I was never a massive Tali fan, preferring other squad mates, and while I liked her, she never usually came on missions post Mass Effect 1, unless I felt I needed a tech specialist. Looking back, scene by scene, BioWare has done a great job setting up one of the best loyalty missions in this game. Firstly, we take what we know about Tali's people, and use that base to build onto it by showing us how Quarians deal with traitors. Tali even gives us this short story of the last Quarian to be charged with treason, who ended up sacrificing herself to save the flotilla, which ultimately led to her being pardoned. Then we get a narrative clash. We have always known Tali to put the flotilla first. Her pride for her people is strong. She's the daughter of an admiral. The 2 times we saw Tali prior to recruitment, she was on a Quarian mission. Why then is she being charged with treason? It's an extremely interesting plot development for her. Lastly, having Tali outright state she's scared here might seem like a missed opportunity for subtext, but I'd argue it actually means more having her be so honest. She was surely scared in Mass Effect 1, but never told us. Her telling us here shows a vulnerability that we haven't really seen from her. Her whole future is unknown and in jeopardy, and far more than it was in the first game. Overall, a really good setup for her. Now, let's dive into one of the coolest loyalty missions in the game. Approaching the migrant fleet, we see a swarm of ships, just like how Tali described to us in the first game. She takes charge, asking for a cleaning team to meet her at the docks, and we see a whole slew of Quarians once we're on board. This is so cool, you guys. This is like getting to go to the Githyanki crash with Lae'zel. Getting a glimpse into an entirely new species' culture, life, and home is always cool and very much welcomed. We then get to speak with our greeting party, who informs Tali that she is being charged with bringing active Geth onto the migrant fleet. And again, Tali is surprised, shocked even, stating that while she did send Geth parts back for study, they were never active units. The plot thickens here on this reveal as we learn more on her charges, but also that Tali might have actually made a mistake. Moving further into the ship, we then speak with Auntie Ran, as Tali calls her, another admiral on the board, but not on the trial today due to her relationship with Tali. We get the revelation that Tali is no longer of the Nema and now of the Normandy. Having her ship name stripped of her means she's as good as exiled, she says, before Commander Shepard is asked to speak for Tali on her trial, as it's explained in Quarian culture that it's normal for the captain to represent the accused. Since she's now Tali Vast Normandy, this duty is taken up by Shepard. Again, a really cool nugget of lore seamlessly woven in here. BioWare makes this whole discussion of Quarian governance and law an actually interesting conversation by not only having it unique, what with the captain of the Quarian in question speaking up for their crewmate, but having it happen to Tali, and finding a good way to have Shepard be involved in the trial and not just standing off to the side. At this point, Tali, and maybe even our own heads, are probably spinning. Things don't make sense. we're wondering what Tali did, and this mystery is fantastic, and now we're about to find out what the heck is going on. As we walk into the hall, we see how the Quarians live. They actually have greenery, which is nice. Quickly, the trial begins. As we engage into the trial, it's revealed that Tali does indeed stand trial for sending parts of Geth that could have reactivated, and of course, we dispute this before one of the admirals, the harshest one of the three and the one most against Tali in this trial, snaps at her, stating that Geth have overtaken her father's ship, and as far as they can tell, he's dead. Tali's hopeless cry here is a great heartstring puller, and this reveal is awesome. An immediate problem is now upon us. Geth are just feet away from the migrant fleet, and Shepard proposes that we put a stop to that here and now. Following this, in our debrief with Ron, she apologizes to Tali for not telling her about her father sooner, but that it was what she had to do to show the board that Tali truly was innocent and had no idea. With that, we're off to save the day. This whole plotline for Tali is utterly fantastic thus far. We again have great narrative cohesion by building on what we know about Quarians and adding a bit more at the top, and that comes in the shape of seeing their homeworld, learning about how they handle serious crimes, and with Tali, we get her father in the center frame of this conflict. We have Tali's heart and love for her people once again being tested through these accusations. We have her tasked with saving her people again. The Admiralty Board dynamic is also great, with 3 members, all of whom come into play. One admiral is a big fan of Tali's, finding this whole trial a farce. Another is completely against Tali, angry, upset, and calling her a fool. It's pretty clear which way he'll be voting. The third admiral comes off a bit more of a centrist, so at this time, it's hard to know which way she'll lean. All of this is so tightly packed together and interesting on multiple levels that I have to praise it all. Even the extended lore about the Quarians planning an all-out war against the Geth is cool to learn, but in regards to Tali, I'm perhaps straying a bit away. It's a little bit hard. With Tali, she is a representative of an entire race for the player. Just like in writing, when they tell you that your villains shouldn't just be a bunch of shadowy figures all a part of an organization, and that it might be wiser to have one central antagonist, that way your protagonist has someone to go up against. The same applies to Tali. She is our lifeline to the Quarians, and so her plot sometimes extends beyond her, like in Mass Effect 1, where a lot of what we can talk to her about is about her people, but not so much about her personally. In this game, thus far, we've gotten a lot more of that personal conflict within Tali, and this loyalty mission is an expert way of weaving her job of being the Quarian plot device and giving her independence to stand on her own, through having to save her father and possibly clean up her mistakes. So, we board the ship and begin trying to solve what the heck happened. Tali finds parts throughout, but struggles to see how any of this could have happened, theorizing that either she made a mistake, or her father might have done something he shouldn't have. We then have a discussion with Tali where she gets frustrated, suspecting her father was purposefully turning on Geth, a crime of the highest order in Quarian law. Was it to keep his promise to Tali of building her a home on Rannoch? She's not sure. Shepard can suggest to Tali to give up trying to get back to her homeworld, and she'll turn to us and criticize us, opening up for the first time on how hard it truly is to live in an envirosuit, how she can't kiss or smell a flower without fearing sickness and death, unlike Commander Shepard. The pilgrimage showed her what her people were missing, and she, like many others, wants their homeworld back sooner rather than later. If that means going to war with the Geth, so be it. I like this. Tali grew up between the first and second games. She isn't a kid anymore. She says here how the pilgrimage ultimately gave her even more pride in her Quarian roots and history, and anytime we've brought up how it might have been wrong for the Quarians to attempt a genocide, Tali vehemently defends her people. Whether you agree with her or not, it's nice that she is willing to stand on her own, and not just blindly agree with the player character. I also enjoy that we can't just Paragon or Renegade speech check her either to change her whole opinion. It's way too early in her plotline for that anyway. She came to this conclusion through her background and had that reinforced once she saw what freedoms the Quarians had been truly living without. That's a very human way of understanding things. Her experiences have ultimately shaped who she is. As we push further in, we find her father who has been killed by the Geth. Tali is distraught, kneeling before her father, wondering how he could die, how he could leave her. We have the chance to console Tali by hugging her, and she then gets to work trying to find out if her father left her any kind of message. Turns out he did, explaining that they have to get to the bridge and prevent the Geth from forming any new neural links. With that, his hologram disappears, and Tali wonders if her father ever cared, or if he did, if this was his twisted way of showing it. This is naturally a big moment for Tali, and another coming-of-age moment as well. Her father, the last piece of her youth, has just died. BioWare was clever, using him as a plot device to further push Tali to grow, but also having him killed by the Geth drives that narrative conflict further, setting up Tali to ultimately be tasked with overcoming her hatred for Legion and the Geth. Clever and very well done, BioWare. This is also our first time actually being able to be physical with Tali, and we're there for her in an extremely low moment. This comes off pretty genuine, and it does set the seedling for the inevitable romance. The final portion of this mission has us shutting down the central hub, and as we arrive at the console, Tali finds some traces left behind by her father. In fact, it's a perfect piece of evidence that can free her from any wrongdoing. It's a video of her father openly admitting to building a Geth neural network from the parts Tali sent them, all in the name of studying a way to defeat the Geth so that he can give his daughter a home on their homeworld. When pushed by his associates that if Tali sent active parts back, that they'd progress much faster, her father denies this, stating that he will not have his daughter caught in any political blowback. Tali is distraught, learning that her father was knowingly committing this crime. Despite the reasons that he had, if they brought this evidence back to the council, yes, it would clear Tali's name, but it would smear her father's, and he'd face a fate worse than exile. He'd be labeled a traitor to his people. Tali pleads for us not to show this video. She'd rather be exiled, never being able to see the migrant fleet again, than have this happen, and to her father. But ultimately, as Tali's captain, it's up to us on what we want to do. This is utterly fantastic. Her loyalty mission so far has hit beat after beat, with no dead space in between. Higher and higher stakes are being built, with more and more emotional weight, and here is no different. We have the video evidence, and in this false victory style, Tali learns that this wouldn't free her. It would only bring her and her father shame and guilt. We see the familial bond as her father draws the line of not involving Tali due to his love for her, and she returns that favor by sacrificing her freedom for his name. Also, true to what we know Tali to be, she is willing to pursue the greater good, especially for a cause like this. These actions she's taken don't just tell us what kind of person she is, they show us. The writers have a firm understanding on what the emotional underlines for Tali are, her father, and they weigh that against the more literal goals that Tali has, clearing her name. This makes for a fantastic conflict and leads to one final choice. Depending on a few factors, you ultimately can expose Tali's father and the evidence, which leads to her being cleared of her charges, but she will be extremely upset with you. You can also speech check the board, clearing Tali of her charges through your charisma. You can rally the crowd only if you've saved Vitor and Cal Rieger, which does also lead to Tali being cleared of charges and makes for some good callbacks, or you can attempt to lie to the council without speech checking at all, leading to her father's image being saved, but Tali ultimately exiled. All of these options tend to lean towards a variation of discussing Tali's contributions to her people and what she sacrificed. Now, I admit, it is a bit of a shame that Shepard does all the talking for Tali here. I understand it for the cultural reasons, but it does feel like Tali herself was robbed of a moment here. I'm not saying she had to do the entire monologue herself, but perhaps having Shepard tell Tali all the things she's done for her people, or in a moment of anger with the council for using her trial as a proxy for pushing the war on the Geth, she can call the board out for this. Instead, she doesn't really get to say anything. Now, in the immediate debriefing with Tali, she can thank you for listening to her wishes and preserving her father's image. This scene, and Shepard defending Tali so aggressively, puts another notch into the budding romance, so this is a bit of a win-loss scenario. We get Shepard standing up for her, but she loses out on a moment that I think she could have benefited from, and that would have probably made this scene pretty much perfect. Overall, this loyalty mission is great. One of the best. Not only is it a deep dive for Quarian culture and law, as we've discussed, but it is a fantastic personal mirror and journey for Tali here, as she faces stakes that test her loyalty to her people, her family, and herself. I'd say this is near perfection barring the ending, where again, if she got a chance to say something at the end of the trial, something to perhaps capstone her intentions to stand by her father, obviously without saying anything about the evidence, then yeah, we'd be looking at a slightly better scene. Her writing across both games thus far has been great. Now we can begin to get into her romance, as for the remainder of Mass Effect 2, there isn't too much more. Approaching Tali, she'll remark that she got a small sickness after patching up some damage that she took aboard the Alarai in her loyalty mission. We can ask her about her people, and she'll provide some lore this time on Quarian biology and their homeworld containing viruses that were actually helpful. And thus, this led to her people's immune system adapting to be in a weaker state. Hence why they're so fragile now to pretty much everything. Something I appreciate with Tali is that despite so much of her being an expositor for Quarian culture, it is nice how varied her expositions get. From Quarian biology to their planet, their politics, law, and history, it makes for a refreshing listen each time she talks to us again, even though a lot of it is lore. But then, we get another shade of Tali here. As Shepard sympathizes with Tali on how hard living in a suit must truly be, she reveals that yes, it is. That even amongst friends, they live in their suits. With someone whom they trust, the most poignant sign of trust is linking their enviro suits together. But Tali reveals that she's never trusted anyone like that. Well, at least not a Quarian. She stumbles, beginning to stutter, and in a comedic sense, looking to backtrack on her statements, protests that she didn't mean it like that. If Shepard pushes back in a romantic way, they can suggest that they'd like to, but that it would be dangerous for Tali, who I'm sure smiles at the thought that Shepard, a dashing commander who is saving the galaxy and her life as she describes, wants to be intimate with her. She awkwardly ends the conversation with Shepard, and this romance is officially off and running. This is fantastic once again. We forget that Tali is still a young Quarian who has lived a life, especially these last 2 years, doing missions and seeing the world, but it's also clear that while she's matured in some ways, love, affection, and opening up to someone who she cares about are still some things that she doesn't have much experience with at all, obviously. Her behavior here is fantastic, and I praise the new shade of Tali that we got to see here as well. Through our time with her, we're slowly exploring more of the kind of person Tali is. We're getting the chance to visibly see her growing into herself, learning from events occurring around her. I like the romance in here as well. It comes off pretty real, and her awkwardness makes sense. Back on Haestrom, we heard the audio logs of Tali reminiscing on her admiration of Shepard, and here she states how dashing and heroic the commander is, so it's not surprising she might have a crush on the commander. The next conversation we can have with Tali comes quickly after our last, where Tali apologizes for her selfishness and her being unprofessional with you, stating that she can't be with you because she would get sick, and that it would jeopardize the mission, that it would cause Shepard to be distracted. She cites that she's watched Shepard for a long time, how he saved colonist son Pharos, how she saw his face when the Vermeer squadmate died, but she never thought Shepard would be able to see past her mask, to see the real her. If Shepard wants, he can commit to Tali here, and he promises that he'll find a way to make it work. And Tali doubles down on this, thanking Shepard for the reassurance here, stating that she wants to feel his skin on hers and that she has never shown her face to anyone, but with Shepard, she trusts them and would be glad to have them be her first. I love it. Some fantastic symbolism here with Tali saying Shepard sees past her mask. Of course, this implies that Shepard sees Tali for who she really is, not just literally her face. Also, a little bit of self-deprecation from Tali where she calls herself selfish for wanting this despite her always being a selfless person, someone who has given everything for her people, never putting her own interests first. The romance being locked in like this is also great, as it really feels like her admiration and affection for Shepard was born out of respect, and she values the trust Shepard has in her, along with how seen she feels around Shep. Just before starting the suicide mission, this romance is capped off by Well, a romance scene. Tali appears behind Shepard, revealing that she has juiced her immune system up to the max for your big night. She starts talking rapidly as she reveals she is nervous, and openly states that it's a defense mechanism when she's nervous, and says she feels the need to over-explain since people can't see her facial expressions. Shepard removes her mask, and the first words, maskless, that she says is the word feeling. Poetic, and an expression that Tali is now being seen in a way she'd never been seen before. She's feeling something she'd never felt before either. Love. She then pounces on Shepard, and romance occurs. A lot of the Mass Effect 2 romance scenes take this steamy approach, but I can appreciate here getting some symbolism around Tali removing her mask, and the briefest mention of her acknowledging her defense mechanism. And that pretty much concludes Tali's story arc in Mass Effect 2. She does have a fantastic set of interactions with Legion, which really helps both us the player and Tali understand the Geth. Legion is perhaps the largest piece of wasted potential in the entire series, but in Mass Effect, making a bit of peace between Tali and Legion when they get into an argument about him sending classified data to the Geth colony, and taking Tali on Legion's loyalty mission, where we learn that the Geth from Mass Effect 1 had been rewritten to worship Sovereign, does some massive leaps and bounds for offering a whole new perspective to us on the Geth. And it does offer Tali that same insight where she completes this mini arc. Her viewpoints shift slightly on the Geth, that perhaps she wasn't fully right in her belief that all Geth are bad, and this plants a great seed for her story in Mass Effect 2 into Mass Effect 3. Overall, Tali's story in this game builds very well from the first. She has clearly grown up from the first game to the second game, and while her arc in the second game isn't as large, the conflict at hand still centers on themes that are important to Tali: pride in your people, doing what must be done, and sacrifice. We get much deeper with Tali emotionally when she finds her father has been killed and she stands trial. We also get seedlings for the Quarian conflict with an impending war on the Geth that is built throughout her loyalty mission, Legion, and Tali's own comments. So far, her characterization and story have been handled pretty darn expertly. Something to note here before we move on to Mass Effect 3 is that, like Garrus, Tali is the only other companion recruitable in all 3 base games. Like Garrus, this means that Tali shares a special bond with the player, no doubt about it. But unlike Garrus, her romance and her story arc have both been handled fantastically, with very little flaws that I can find thus far. She is equal parts well done in writing as she is with fitting in the sci-fi lore of her people, race, and goals. Let's move into the third game and see if she can maintain this solid momentum. For Tali, once again, she is pushed a little down the line in regards to recruitment. After the defense of the Citadel, Hackett tells us the Quarians would be willing to help in the war effort, and they were requesting a meeting with Shepard. So we head out to the Perseus Vale, and we no doubt expect to see Tali. All the admirals come on board, and then the newest admiral, Tali Vos Normandy, reappears. It's a surprise to us, no doubt, that she's been named an admiral, especially given what happened in her loyalty mission, but she suggests it's just a formality due to her vast information on the Geth. She reiterates that the Quarians first need to finish this stupid war with the Geth before they can assist Shepard, and we can probe Tali, confused on why she isn't for the war. She cites her conversations with Legion as the reason she believes there could be peace, but cites that she had to agree with the Admiralty Board, citing that her disagreement would have led to division that her people did not need. We then get a chance to rekindle the embers of our romance with Tali, who takes a very mature response here, stating that she'd prefer if this is kept a secret in front of the admirals, before implying that Shepard should invite her up to their cabin if they truly wish to speak. She reminds Shepard that their night of romance was still totally worth it, and this concludes her intro. I think this is my favorite intro of the 3, and I'll tell you why. The reveal of Tali being named an admiral is pretty cool, and a big character growth moment for her. Her citing that peace in her mind is possible is of course a callback to our time spent with Legion. In order for her to accept that change in her mind, having her interact with Legion was an important step. When Legion attempted to send Quarian plans for attack on the Geth, Legion did what Tali would have done if the roles had been reversed: help his people. She can see that once Shepard diffuses the situation. When Tali goes with Legion on his loyalty mission and sees how misguided its people are, that strikes a chord perhaps, as Tali questions if her own people's hatred of the Geth is even justified. if perhaps the Quarians are at fault as well. She has maybe realized that Legion and her are not as different as she might have believed, and that's just really well done writing. You want to tell your audience that Tali and Legion are similar. How do you do it? By making a quest that weaves in these themes and points. That is good writing. So, her addressing that here is fantastic, and we'll get more of that as her story progresses. Once again, we see that Tali's character hasn't stayed stagnant either. She's still got pride for her people, but she is now a leader amongst them, and might have the kind of rhetoric that can help unite two people together. Unconsciously, she's got to figure out how she can do that, and/or if she even wants to make peace with the Geth. We can then speak with Tali before inviting her up to our cabin, and she'll detail how she became an admiral, but more importantly, how she's struggling to keep afloat, managing what she thinks is best versus what the other admirals, and perhaps her own people, think is best. She details how she didn't want this war and wanted to try peace talks with Legion, who she'd been keeping in contact with, but was outvoted. Her tone of voice suggests that she struggled not to tell Legion about the attack, but as Shepard states, she'd have betrayed her own people. Once more, Tali sacrifices for the greater good, for her people. This is consistent characterization, and again, great conflict, as we see a personal struggle within her. Inviting Tali up to our cabin provides even more insight into her struggle. Shepard asks her point blank if she's okay, and she responds bluntly that she's not. She is struggling knowing that 17 million lives and an entire fleet rest on her young shoulders. She admits that she accepted the position because she believes it's what Shepard would have done, but still, she feels out of place. A bit of imposter syndrome. You can then rekindle the romance here, asking Tali to stay with you, reminding her that she isn't alone. And with that, another fantastic scene ends. Again, BioWare nailed the parallels here, likening Tali to Shepard here. Both are leaders of their people. Both are struggling with accepting that they can't save everyone. Both are struggling to make their voices heard amongst those who would not listen in their race. It works so well here. On top of this, we get another callback to Tali looking up to Shepard here, and of course, we get some of Tali's blunt honesty as well. This scene serves as an emotional plate that serves us insight into Tali's inner conflict of being the leader she needs to be, and also her outer conflicts of making possible peace between the Quarians and the Geth, along with getting her people's home back and avoiding the death of her entire race. Fantastic stuff. Super tight writing, very well layered, really well structured. Everything Tali has told us is being reused here, and that is an excellent use of your real estate within a script. It seems her writing in Mass Effect 3 is starting off even stronger than in Mass Effect 1 and in Mass Effect 2. Something I'll specifically say regarding the Quarian v Geth conflict is that it's not only an extremely relevant plot, being attached to the larger conflict of the Reapers v Organics, but it's also timely for our own time in the current day with the rise of AI. Not to mention, this is probably the most well-done plot out of the entire trilogy. This story cleverly chose the representatives that I talked about earlier in the form of Tali and Legion, who are both similar in regards to personality, but also wildly different in terms of makeup and species. This plot is full both with regards to its world conflict, all the way down to how that's shown its drama through its own character conflicts. It's fantastic stuff. Then comes the Dreadnought, where we venture back into Geth culture, and luckily we'll have Tali with us, who comments on how advanced all of this seems, how this war is highly risky for her people. Then we stumble upon Legion, rescue him, and the stern-headed admiral from the second game, Admiral Garel, thinks now is a good time to fire on the ship that we're also on board of. It's a great callback, bringing Garel back and having some infighting between the Quarians. I love this plotline. There are so many different conflicts going on. You then get a mission centered more on Legion and the Geth perspective. While not technically a part of Tali's story, having the additional perspective on what happened to the Geth and how they felt betrayed by their creators is fantastic. It adds context to Tali's life and her feeling of uneasiness regarding the war and why it might not have been the right decision, which, as you're seeing, is something that's also developing through the third game. It's sort of a mini arc for Tali as she comes to peace knowing that her people might have also made a mistake, but the ultimate decision still lies in her hands as to if they want to correct that mistake. We also get to assault a Geth air defense base. We also find some dead Quarians, civilians practically, who have never even held a gun before. and others that are dead at the scene, as we find out just how much the Quarians are willing to sacrifice for their cause. The weight of this war is pressing down further. It truly feels like we're reaching the climax of a century-old conflict, and the climax of the next chapter in Tali's life. And sure enough, here's our climax. Priority Rannoch has us land at the Quarian homeworld, and this is it, the final fight. This mission has to be the legitimate peak of Mass Effect 3, and Tali being a central key figure in this just highlights how amazingly put together this whole storyline was. For her story specifically, we get near the end where you fight a whole Reaper by yourself and she tells you that she loves you, and Shepard will respond back with the Quarian phrase, Kila Salai. Oh man, the duality of them telling each other how much they care about each other in this moment in their respective partner's language. Can it get better than this? Well, apparently yes, it can. After you destroy said Reaper, both Legion and Tali will meet you below. Legion remarks that he can upload the Reaper code without fear that the Geth will become mindless slaves, and instead be restored to full intelligent, fully sentient individual beings. Tali remarks that this would mean the Quarian fleet would be obliterated, pleading with Shepard not to do this. And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is how you write. Remember earlier when I said that Tali was on a mini arc of trying to see if her people made a mistake and if helping the Geth is the right thing? Well, boom, here comes a decision that ultimately is so true to her character. Two things can be true at the same time. She might feel that the Geth were done dirty, but in this moment she has to now decide between the Geth and her people, and we know Tali. She will always pick her people. This Quarian v Geth conflict received a lot of build-up for Mass Effect 1 and 2, never falling flat, and with Tali, one of our most loyal squad mates as the expositor, plus all of this conflict tying directly into her own personal goals, when we get to this decision, man is it hard. Throw in Legion, and then us getting further perspective in Mass Effect 3, and you have a very seriously hard moral dilemma. And it's a hard moral dilemma because it's so well built up through both sides. This scene has a few alternate ways of ending, with arguably the saddest being if you can't persuade check the conflict and you side with Legion, in which Tali literally watches her entire race be destroyed before her very eyes. Her sobs as she removes her mask and then hurls herself off the cliff is just, my god. I had honestly forgotten for a minute how amazing this game's writing and presentation was at times. Seriously, this is the peak of Mass Effect 3. That hit so hard. And of course, if you side with Tali, the entire Geth race will die and you lose Legion in a very brutal fashion. But in order to get the most from Tali's story, we'll go down the speech check route. In this route, you complete one of the biggest plots in the game by uniting the Geth and Quarian people, with Tali completing her arc by acknowledging that Legion does in fact have a soul. This of course is subtextual because her admitting that Legion has a soul is also admitting that what the Quarians did to the Geth was wrong. Beautiful stuff. It's also of course a callback to the very thing that set this whole world alight, when the first Geth asked if they had a soul. Beautiful stuff. She also completes an outer conflict at the same time by giving her people their homeworld back. I mean, it's fantastic character growth, and what a powerful line to hold for Tali until this very moment. How far Tali has come. This moment is that pinnacle character growth moment for her, overcoming her hatred towards Geth and becoming a hero amongst her people. The moment you have with Tali is fantastic too. It is super grounded. Shepard says that he won't ask Tali to leave her homeworld, and she tells Shepard that she doesn't know if they can beat the Reapers, but with the time that she has left, she wants to be with Shepard. I love the fact that Shepard can even acknowledge the fact that it's kind of unfair to ask Tali to leave after just getting her homeworld back. It's an extremely mature tone that this conversation has. It's also Shepard being a good partner and not being selfish, and once again has Tali being selfless. Not to throw dirt at him, but in my Garrus analysis, a little gripe I had with him was that his romance and his story had far too much flirting and not enough deep conversations like this. Yes, Tali and the Commander flirt right after this, but it comes off much more naturally since Shepard made his concerns known right from the opening moment of this scene. and once Tali gave him the reassurance, he makes a little joke to lighten the mood. I am pretty stunned how flawless Tali has made out in this trilogy, honestly. I have zero complaints at all. This wraps up Rannoch, and with it, wraps up a huge chunk of Tali's story. Now of course, like any of the other companions, Tali is able to come along on every mission and provides great banter and lines on said missions and on the Normandy, interacting with Liara, the Vermeer survivor, and even setting up an implied romance between her and Garrus if Shepard didn't romance her. She feels as natural to the party as any of the others I'd mentioned, but man, does her story just blow the other three out of the water. Despite them all being OGs, Tali is on another level both in personal conflicts and outer goals, from character depth and growth, to her core traits always presenting themselves when her people are in need of her. Should we wrap up the remainder of Tali's story and romance then? Just like in my Garrus analysis, I won't be covering pretty much any of the Citadel DLC, although seeing a drunk Tali is hilarious and fantastic. The apartment date where she shows you the romance movie that FTL'd her into puberty and sings to you is just ridiculous, man, and a lot of fun, as is the entirety of that DLC, and a compliment that I'm going to toss to the Citadel DLC is us getting to see more of that fun side of Tali that we had only really seen glimpses of before. Here, we get to see how much of a goof and a nerd she can be. It's great stuff. Just before the final attack on the Reapers, Tali will come to your cabin, and the two of you share one final romance. Afterward, Shepard lets the weight of everything come down on them, just a bit here, and it's Tali who reminds him that no one else could have done more, that Shepard has brought everyone together. Shepard wonders if there'll be anything left after the fighting is over, and Tali empathizes with Shepard. They both have and do feel this way. Tali shares that when she gets like that, she reaches for Shepard. Poignant words, truly. We already know that Tali idolizes Shepard and has been for a long time, but now that the two are together, she uses her shared experiences to lift Shepard up. Nice. And thus she begin the advance on Earth. Tali and Shepard mirror each other here in the final talk before the final push, where they remember Rannoch, how they told each other they loved each other, how it's Shepard's turn to take his homeworld back. The duality in the writing here is rich. If you romance Tali, then it's even richer. The advance proceeds, and Harbinger's beam hits your team, and Shepard sends them to retreat, and you get one final moment with Tali. Shepard tells Tali, despite her pleas not to leave her, that he wants her to go back to Rannoch, to build herself a home, to which Tali responds that she already has a home, pleading with Shepard to come back with her. With that is the last thing we say to Tali, and Shepard goes on to save the galaxy. It's a fantastic last line filled with double meaning. Of course, Tali has a home, and that is on Rannoch, but subtextually speaking, she of course means that Shepard is her home, the place that she feels safest, most secured, and loved. Wherever he goes is where her home is. And that wraps up an utterly fantastic trilogy spanning story for Tali. If you ask me, not that you are, but since I love comparisons, her story is far tighter, more dynamic, and better written than Garrus's, the only other 3-game companion. She has a lot going on, and I have to say, BioWare handled her blooming of a character pretty damn well. Mass Effect 1, we had a scared Quarian teen that was just embarking on seeing the galaxy. Her goal was just to find something to bring back to her people, and she ended up on a team that saved the galaxy alongside Shepard. In Mass Effect 2, Tali had been forced to grow up a little faster, and due to her father being an admiral, no doubt felt the weight of impressing her entire race. From her devout pride for her Quarian race in the first game, it comes as a surprise that she's on trial for treason, and going on that trial just expands far further into the Quarian people. She loses her father, and we see another wound for her character develop, but also see her grow into a future example to her people as she takes on the Collectors and once again saves the galaxy. But the impending war from her race looms ever present on her mind. And in Mass Effect 3, here comes that war that has had 2 games worth of buildup, and Tali is now an admiral, again, growing in position literally, but also in maturity, realizing what her disagreeing with the board could mean for her people, and as always, she's just trying to do the right thing. We take everything we have come to know about her and her people, and the Geth, and this forces her into a war, once more tasked with saving the galaxy, yes, but more importantly, saving her homeworld,
and ending this conflict with the Geth. She has extremely strong conflict through all 3 games, with her characterization showing multiple facets of a person, from funny to cunning to loving to deeply emotional. There isn't a moment for me in her story that really sags, apart from probably Mass Effect 1, but one could argue that this was a sacrifice that the second and third games benefited from, since we had so much lore established. She never feels out of place either. With this being a sci-fi game and her tech specialty, it always makes sense in my headcanon to bring her along on missions. I'm impressed by BioWare's ability to juggle her so well for so long. Out of the 2 squad mates recruitable across all 3 games, I think her writing blows Garrus's out of the water. There's just more there, and the stakes are higher too. Out of all the OGs, I dare say she might be one of the best handled too, but I'll hold off on saying anything else until those analyses are complete. But that is going to conclude this analysis on Tali. This was a blast, and I was surprised. It's been a while since I'd played through the series, and my memory was a bit foggy on some of the shorter and smaller scenes. Tali is very well written. A big thank you to YouTuber NeilX Gaming for posting 8 whole hours worth of Tali content. Saved me a little bit of time, so thank you. Also, a large thank you to everyone watching this video. By the time of upload, no doubt we'll have hit 4,000 subscribers, which is another milestone, and of course, just 1,000 away from 5,000. I can't begin to say how thankful I am to everyone. You folks have no idea the joy this stuff brings me, and how helpful the extra money is to me and my future family. So thank you. The next Mass Effect character analysis poll will be posted on my community page, so go ahead and head on over and vote for who you'd like to see next. Until the next time, everyone, be well, take care of yourself, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.